This podcast is brought to you by The Shift.
It's story time!
Hello and welcome back to the Storytime Podcast. My name is Claire, I go by Clisare on the internet, and this is the podcast where guests tell me their stories. And this week I have with me Andrew Davie. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone, tell them where to find you on the internet?
Sure. Well, I think the best place probably, I have a website. It's just andrew-davie.com. And then from there, it has links to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I co-host a music podcast with my friend Heather. So there's a link to that. And you can find, I also am a writer, so you can find links to all of my stories and books that are on the website. So that's probably the best place to find me.
You have a very interesting story for us this week.
I do, yes. So I guess it's been a little over, in June of 2018, just to give you a bit of context, I had been teaching high school English at a school for students who have learning disabilities. And I had just actually quit my job to pursue a graduate degree. And the summer was about to begin. I was about to start summer break from teaching. I was going to visit my parents. So I was at an airport. I was about to get on a flight and I felt really tired all of a sudden. And I started to sweat a lot, like I had just run a marathon, which at the time I thought, okay, this is a little strange, but perhaps I'm just coming down with the flu. So if I just make it on the plane, everything will be fine. And then I stood up to board the plane. I gave them my ticket and the floor started to shift like I was in a fun house. And I remember thinking, okay, this is getting weirder, but if I can just make it on the plane, I'll be fine. And then I fell on the jetway. And thankfully, again, being at the airport on the jetway, first responders were able to get to me. And I remember thinking, I can't miss my flight. My mother's going to be very upset. And the first responder said, don't worry about it. You can always catch another flight. And he laughed because I guess he thought my priorities of not upsetting my mother were sort of out of whack, considering that I had just fallen down. And it turns out I had had a ruptured brain aneurysm. So I wasn't going to be getting on any flights for a while. And I don't remember the next 2.5 weeks. Apparently I was in intensive care. I was taken to a hospital and I was in intensive care and I was able to speak to people. I was having conversations, but I have absolutely no memory of it. And at the time I had been taking a flight on an airline called JetBlue, and they have an emergency contact information. So I had put down my mother's name and number. So JetBlue called her and said, your son fell and wasn't able to board his flight. So that was all the information my family knew. And then when I was in surgery, one of the doctors found my phone and recognized my brother's last name. And my brother and his family were visiting with my parents at the time. So he called them and said, your son had an aneurysm. He's in the hospital. All of you need to fly up to Washington, D.C. So that's sort of how everyone found out. I wrote a memoir about the experience, which sort of addresses that and a lot of other things that happened, with the recovery and how that's been. So it's been a very interesting experience, to say the least. And then I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks, just in intensive care, and then that cleared. And I stayed in the hospital for another 2 weeks to do various physical therapy and whatnot. And then I left, came back home, did outpatient therapy for a while, And I made a remarkable recovery. I would say it's probably in the 99th percentile, just in terms of I still have poor balance and my vision. It's sort of, if you're familiar with what it's like when you step off a merry-go-round and your vision sort of, it's still, so that's what I experience when I move my head. But thankfully I don't feel sick, like I don't get nauseous. So it's sort of something that I've been able to adjust back to.
So what is a brain aneurysm?
So it's when a vein in your brain sort of explodes. I guess that's. I mean, it doesn't necessarily only happen in the brain. People have aneurysms, but I believe it's where a vein, the wall of a vein, gets punctured or something like that. But it's like a stroke, basically. It was interesting because there are a lot of causes, most of which are not very, like if you abuse cocaine a lot, which I certainly did not, but that's, smoking, I think can cause that. I feel like I was sort of struck by lightning. Like it was just a random, there was no history of it in my family or anything. It just sort of happened. The last couple of years have been really interesting to sort of reflect on the fact that I happened to be at an airport in a public place when it happened. I probably wouldn't have survived. So it's a very interesting sort of thing to consider.
Yeah, and even the way you were saying, like you were kind of, I need to get on this flight. Like it surely would have been very bad for you if you hadn't have been stopped to get on the flight, because then you would have been stuck in the air with no help.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, everything that could have gone my way ended up going my way. Even things that at the time were bad or seemed bad ended up playing out well. So yeah. I often think about, there's a great, I forgot if it's Buddhist or Taoist story where the lesson is let's wait and see if something is good or bad. So for me, at least, things that seemed to be pretty bad or dire turned out to be a blessing. And I go through all of this and many of the stories that I have, while the subject matter seems really serious and unpleasant, are really funny in retrospect. There was a moment when I was in intensive care where I wouldn't give my parents the password to my computer because I said that I would begin to tell them, and then I would stop and I would lecture them on the importance of protecting that information. So there was another moment where I was certain that an assassin was going to come to the hospital and kill everyone. So I said we all had to leave. And because my mother is as wonderful as she is, she said, "Don't worry, the assassin called and I spoke to him and he's not going to come. He canceled. So we're all safe." And I accepted that as.
That's a great response.
Oh yeah, no, So everything turned out to be great. Just with regard to, physically, I recovered really well. Emotionally, it's been obviously much, much longer of a process to sort of adjust. And then obviously COVID kind of magnified everything. So for the last year and a half, I've been living with my parents. I actually just moved back to my apartment about a week ago. So I'm sort of like a work in progress. I feel like we all kind of are in our own way. It's sort of like we had just been building a set of dominoes, and COVID was like the bully in the neighborhood that came over and kicked them over before they had been finished. So I feel like now I'm building my domino set again.
Yeah. Do you feel COVID helped in your recovery in that, like, it kind of, I guess the pace of life slowed down a little bit?
Yes. And well, it was interesting because I had felt really overwhelmed with my adjustment before COVID. And I had kind of just begun to, like, I had found a new job that was going to start. I was going to be a tutor. Rather than, I found teaching to be a little overwhelming. I tried to substitute teach at my old school, and I just felt like I wasn't up to speed. So tutoring, I thought, would be a better fit. So there were a lot of opportunities to begin sort of building my life back up, which were all canceled because of COVID. So in that regard, it didn't help. But I also moved back in with my parents and didn't have to worry so much about making difficult decisions because there just wasn't a lot to do. So in that regard, it was a good opportunity. And I think I continued to heal over the last year and a half. So the emotional adjustment that I've made since then has been great. Just feeling less overwhelmed with things. But yeah, I mean, I would say ultimately it's been a really interesting experience. There have been a lot of wonderful moments where I've been able to reflect on my values and what's really important. My perspective has changed on a lot of things. So I wouldn't say that this is an experience everyone should have. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but having gone through it, I've certainly seen a lot of silver linings and enjoyed certain things much more.
Yeah, wow. That's thank you so much for sharing your story.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, I go into a lot of depth in my memoir, which covers the aneurysm as well as different jobs I've had and online dating experiences. So I've sort of split it into a comedy tragedy type thing. And many of the experiences in the tragedy section are really funny, like the not giving the password to my parents. And, obviously many experiences in the comedy section, like online dating, are tragic in just that they never worked out. So, but yeah, no, and I really appreciate the opportunity just to speak. I feel one thing that really helped me through it all was just knowing that I wasn't alone in feeling a certain way. I think sometimes it's easier to endure things when we know it's not unique to us. So being able to tell my story, or if other people out there are struggling with something, just know that everyone is going through a difficult time with something. So it's been great to just be able to sort of articulate that.
And if you could remind everyone really quickly where to find you, where to buy your memoir.
Sure. So I think if you just go to andrew-davie.com, that's probably the easiest place because that's where all the information is. My memoir is called Land of Illusions with an A, and it's on Amazon. I tend to make a lot of pop culture and movie references. So I've found it's easy to make analogies so that people will understand immediately what I'm discussing. Although sometimes I can create it on my own. I apologize, I'm going off on a tangent, but
no worries.
But yeah, no, that's so just andrew-davie.com. You can find everything there, writing, podcasting, what have you. But yeah, no, so I go on, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I will put all your links down in the description on YouTube, and they will also be in the show notes on the audio platforms if people just want to scroll down and click through to go and find you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope everything else continues to be well.
Thank you so much for watching or listening if you're listening on the audio platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on the audio platforms, please give us a review. It really helps us out in the old rankings. And I shall see you in the next one. Thanks again, Andrew.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This podcast was brought to you by The Shift. For more like this, check out theshift.ie.